Cocoa prices have more than doubled this year, outperforming Bitcoin and the S&P 500 index. The highest performing commodity of 2024, cocoa soared to a record high of $12,500 per ton, a 180% gain. The increase in prices stems from several factors, including adverse weather conditions, disease concerns, low global inventories, soaring cargo costs, and years of underinvestment in cocoa farming. The 2023-2024 cocoa season netted a supply deficit of nearly 500,000 tons, making it the largest deficit in more than 60 years. Denmark is introducing a Burp Tax. Starting in 2030, the government will be charging farmers 300 kroners, which is about $43 per ton for carbon dioxide emissions from livestock, including cows and pigs. This will ramp up to $106 per ton by 2035. Question: if you fart and the government isn't around to tax it, did you really fart? Since sports betting was legalized by the Supreme Court in 2018, addiction has skyrocketed. Sports betting alone grew from $7.6 billion in 2022 to $11 billion in 2023. In the first quarter of this year, sports betting increased by 22% compared to the first quarter of last year. So far, 38 states have legalized sports betting since the 2018 Supreme Court ruling, and addicts are piling up. Since then, texts and chats to the National Problem Gambling Helpline have increased nearly 800%, while call volume grew by nearly 80%. Phone calls to the Council on Compulsive Gambling of New Jersey went up nearly 300% that year as well. And although Ohio didn't legalize sports betting until 2023, the Problem Gambling Network in the state saw a 66% surge in call volume. The annual national social cost of problem gambling is nearly $14 billion. There's an estimated 2.5 million adults in the U.S. that meet criteria for a severe gambling problem in a given year, according to the National Council on Problem Gambling. President Trump's stock was heavily shorted the day before the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania. Finbold journalist Elma Sabovic is reporting that short positions against Truth Social doubled between July 1st and July 12th. Going from 7 million shares to 15 million shares. This was a record-breaking amount of shorted shares for the DJT stock since it began trading this past March. The reporter notes that, quote, this surge indicates that individuals or large organizations anticipated a significant drop in the stock's value by July 15th, a scenario that would likely have materialized had President Trump died in Pennsylvania. Drug shortages in the U.S. are at an all-time high. There were more than 320 active medication shortages in the first quarter of this year. Hospitals and clinics are running out of chemotherapy drugs, causing doctors to ration or prioritize who gets the medication. Another alarming shortage is in emergency drugs that are stored in crash carts at hospitals. ADHD medications like Adderall have also faced shortages since late 2022, stemming from both manufacturing delays and increased demand. Drug shortages overall have become a growing problem over the past decade, according to a report from the Senate Homeland Security Committee last year. This issue was made worse by the 2020 crisis. Although the FDA says it can, quote, utilize different tools during a shortage to assist manufacturers, they are unable to share specific actions as they are considered commercial confidential information. The Texas wildfires are melting cars, just like the wildfire did in Lahaina last August. Images from both incidents look eerily similar. As one Texas resident described his property, the house is gone and all the cars are melted. There's nothing left. We heard the same sentiment from Maui Fire Chief John Pelletier.
The remains we're finding is through a fire that melted metal. We have to do rapid DNA to identify them. So just understand what this thing is, because none of us really know the size of it yet.
The destruction doesn't end at the vehicles melting. There are 5 active wildfires burning across Texas, including the Smokehouse Creek Fire, which is the largest wildfire in the state's history. More than 1 million acres have burned, and that footprint is expected to more than double before it's extinguished. If that happens, it will surpass all of California's fires and become the 3rd largest fire in U.S. history. The Panhandle region that's burning is home to nearly 85% of Texas's 11 million cattle. Flames are climbing the thick, tall grasses and reaching as high as 20 to 30 feet. Stretching more than 2,000 square miles, the fire has caused more than 3,600 cattle to perish, with fire complications forcing many more to be euthanized. This all adds up to immense cost for the ranchers. Cattle cost about $3,000 to replace. The thousands of miles of fencing destroyed is also pricey, costing about $10,000 per mile to install. To make matters worse, insurance won't cover the cost of rebuilding fencing, barns, ranch infrastructure, and burial of cattle. Federal investigators requested banks to comb through customer transactions for terms such as MAGA and Trump. Banks were also warned that purchases of religious texts could indicate extremism. Other suggested keywords to search for included Dick's Sporting Goods, Cabela's, and Bass Pro Shops. This bombshell information came from a letter by the House Judiciary Committee. The Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network also sent materials to financial institutions on typologies and various persons of interests. Banks were also provided search terms and merchant category codes for identifying transactions on behalf of federal law enforcement. An analysis of lone actor homegrown violent extremism indicators was also included. This analysis contains a list of indicators that include transportation charges, such as bus tickets, rental cars, or plane tickets for travel areas with no apparent purpose, as well as the purchase of books, including religious texts, and subscriptions to other media containing extremist views. According to testimony, Bank of America provided the FBI with a list of customers who made transactions in the Washington, D.C. area between January 5th and January 7th of 2021. The bank did this voluntarily and without any legal process. Oregon is shutting down family farms at the request of Big Dairy. It all has to do with the Oregon Department of Agriculture reinterpreting what qualifies as a CAFO. CAFO is short for Confined Animal Feeding Operation. This traditionally meant large dairy farms that feed their cows like this. But small dairy farms weren't considered a CAFO because they didn't confine their animals, instead opting to let them roam the land. A white paper from the department last year changed all of this. Now, merely bringing animals indoors for milking for just a few minutes a day means the operation is a CAFO. Let's say you decide to milk outside in the middle of the winter to get around this new rule. It's still not enough. Previously, farms with no more than 2 producing cows or 9 producing goats or sheep were exempt from food safety and fluid milk license regulations, including raw milk farmers. Not anymore. Now, merely cleaning milking equipment or washing containers would now make a small farmer a CAFO. The department says this creates wastewater. They also say that these small farmers are CAFOs since they handle manure and clean their equipment. The Oregon Department of Agriculture published a white paper last year saying, quote, CAFO permit registrations are important for 3 reasons. First, to prevent water pollution. Second, to comply with the federal and state law. Third, to maintain a level playing field with all dairies holding Grade A fluid milk licenses that bear the costs of compliance with water quality regulations. These rule changes will take effect on April 1st. Those not in compliance will face fines of up to $2,500 a day for a first offense and up to $10,000 for repeat violations, and these fines can be assessed daily. Small farmers are trapped because they can't afford the violation fines, but they also can't afford compliance. It would mean tens of thousands of dollars of equipment just to keep up with the new rule. The Institute of Justice is suing the Oregon Department of Agriculture on behalf of a small group of dairy farmers. Their lawyers claim the new rule is unconstitutional, violating the 14th Amendment. This rule change comes at the behest of Big Dairy. According to the department's own communications, the CAFO program received concerns from Oregon's dairy industry. The Institute of Justice is seeking an injunction on this rule, asserting that the Constitution does not allow protectionism to justify regulation. Since a quarter of Oregon's land is used for agriculture, this rule change could have a huge impact. Of the state's more than 35,000 farms, 84% are individually or family-owned, and 81% are under 180 acres in size. Family and individual farms have been dwindling for some time now. From 2002 to 2022, industrial operations grew by 60%. This means farming is being concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people. Currently, 3% of the state's farms account for 3/4 of all agricultural goods from the state. Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law was found dead just weeks before the senator announced he was stepping down. Police found Angela Chow inside her car on February 11th, just a few minutes after midnight. It had plunged into a pond on a ranch that is connected to her husband, venture capitalist Jim Breyer. Police have said the incident is, quote, under criminal investigation. Blanco County Sheriff's Office elaborated, saying, quote, this incident was not a typical accident. Authorities are refusing to release the 911 call and video evidence related to her death. Thomas Matthew Crooks's body was cremated within 10 days after the Butler, Pennsylvania rally. Representative Clay Higgins discovered this after he tried to view Crooks's body on August 5th as part of his investigation on the bipartisan task force that's reviewing the assassination attempt. Representative Higgins claims that nobody knew that Crooks's body had been returned to the family, including the county coroner and local law enforcement. Higgins also says that the coroner still had legal authority over the body when the FBI decided to release it. Higgins is accusing the FBI of obstruction. These findings were released in a preliminary investigative report that was submitted to Task Force Chairman Mike Kelly on August 12th. It was released to the public via Representative Higgins' website on August 15th. Senator Ron Johnson has claimed that Congress is being stonewalled by the FBI, DOJ, and United States Secret Service. He went as far as to say, quote, from standpoint of federal law enforcement, they are the law. They believe they're pretty much above the law, and they've never been held accountable. They don't believe they really need to be held accountable to the American public. They can avoid scrutiny. So that's how they're handling this investigation. Now that you know where we've been, find out where we're going. Tune in to Ladies Love Politics, where you can stay informed without going insane.